Is it wrong to kill? We all agree murder is wrong, but what about killing at all? Like maybe insects when you lay a foundation for a building, or even larger animals if they are an invasive species and a good food source, such as hogs in my state of Texas. Some religious groups, such as Jainists, believe it's always wrong to kill, even insects, leading them to wear masks so they don't even accidentally swallow a bug. On the other end of the spectrum, you have people who argue it should be permissible to factory farm animals who spend most of their lives suffering due to their captivity. As a more extreme example, is it permissible to defend yourself by ending another person's life, even say by accident? What about preemptively striking if you know they plan on taking your life? In addition to killing, what about lying? We generally say lying is wrong, but also make exceptions fairly regularly. For instance, during World War II, nearly all of us would say those who hid Jews in their house were justified in lying to the Nazis, saying there were no Jews there. Or maybe if someone's partner has become emotionally abusive, they might be justified in lying by telling them they're going out to dinner with friends, when really they're seeing a marital therapist. Or even little white lies, which we all tend to engage in. Like when we tell someone we like their outfit, even when we may actually think they look ridiculous. Or what about stealing? This one's easy, right? If something does not belong to you, you shouldn't take it. Except we've all heard the hypothetical example of a mother who steals a little food in order to feed her kids. Say if the owner was so rich they wouldn't even notice the food was missing, but it still belonged to them. Was it wrong for the mother to steal? Most of us would say no, and that the mother actually did the right thing by taking the food to feed her kids. In a more benign example, is it always wrong to break the law? Well, nearly all of us would say there are times when driving above the legal speed limit is the right choice, even though you're technically breaking the law. Like if you need to rush to the hospital to save someone's life. With literally every action we call wrong, evil, or immoral, there are extremely exceptional cases where we say some are actually permissible. But this begs the question then of, well, where do we draw the line? How do we know which actions to ban completely or which should be allowed? And how severe should the punishment be for breaking these rules we set? There are those who cling to idealized codes of conduct, saying that whoever adheres to them is good and whoever does not is bad in any situation. And conversely, there are those who actively avoid ever adhering to any rules in order to sneak by their own immoral behavior unnoticed. So where is the middle? What is right and wrong? What are ethics and morality? Welcome to Axiom, where we share, discuss, and practice methods for living a happier, healthier, and more fulfilled life. In this first chapter of our program, we've been discussing the mind. We have proposed definitions for what the mind is, explained how it processes information, makes autonomous decisions, and crucially, seeks to maximize its own happiness. In addition to these functions, a very important topic, or should we say sensation, naturally arises when discussing the mind. This is the sense of right and wrong, also called good and bad or evil, moral and immoral, ethical or unethical. Because these feelings of right and wrong, good and bad, are all sensations, They will be covered here in our chapter on the mind. Until now in our program, we haven't introduced the words ethics or morality, but we did begin with another concept, that of happiness and unhappiness. We covered how certain sensations seem to make us happy. Sometimes we can do this on our own, maybe by thinking of a happy memory or a vacation we'd like to take. In addition to this, however, sometimes other things cause us to be happy or unhappy that are entirely outside our control, such as pricking your finger on a thorn when grabbing a rose, or feeling happy and content watching a sunset. These are sensations we can't entirely control. They are caused by things outside us, and only by changing how we're interacting with them can we change the feeling we're receiving from them. These sensations are being caused by things which objectively exist. Just like we established in 1a that something must objectively exist, so too does the thorn that caused you pain objectively exist. And by objective, we mean that it is not dependent on perspective, whereas the way a statue looks might depend on the angle it's being viewed from, thus making that a subjective question. Whether the statue is made of bronze or marble does not depend on perspective or opinion, and thus is objective, meaning it's something inherent to the object. In the case of the rose thorn, there is objectively something which is making you feel pain. This is not completely up to you, and it is inherent to the object causing the sensation. You are objectively feeling pain in that moment. Obviously, we naturally try to avoid any sensation which makes us unhappy. That's why we instinctively pull our hand away from a hot stove. And every time we notice a pattern of something generally causing pain or maybe happiness, we make a general rule about that thing. Maybe we decide not to go near rose bushes without gloves in the future. Or maybe we decide to go to the beach every summer to get a good tan. These rules pertain to minor changes to our happiness. But what about major changes? What if instead of just a thorn prick, the risk was even more discomfort? Say losing a finger while operating heavy machinery, or even risking your life on a construction project. Conversely, what if the happiness on offer was more than just a great day at the beach? What if it was complete bliss? Maybe a garden paradise with every type of food, recreation, exertion, and relaxation, and your pick of who else is there. These major changes to happiness are the same as the minor ones, except on a larger scale, and thus are more consequential. We would make stricter rules for achieving these, and more harshly discourage breaking these rules. But avoiding unhappiness and striving to achieve happiness is still the only goal. It is the reason why we take each next breath, why we work out, go to school, play games, etc. Even if we don't know for sure what paradise would look like, we seem to be fairly capable of telling what is leading us closer to or further away from it. Now, this clearly applies to individual people, but what about multiple people? When two people meet each other, are their goals now different? What changes about their motives when they get into company with each other? The answer is nothing. Nothing changes at all. Both people are still entirely working toward their own happiness, whatever they perceive that to be. As soon as two people meet, they simply must assess the other's potential to aid them on their journey to the happiness they are trying to achieve. Just like two hikers passing each other on the way to their destination, they may either help by giving good directions, accidentally give bad directions, or maybe even give bad directions on purpose. Regardless, it is up to each member of the group to decide whether they think the other member has more potential to help or hinder them. At Axiom, we think that people generally recognize the potential for others to help in our journey toward happiness. From the time we are children, we recognize that our parents feed us and keep us warm. Although we may not agree with our parents in every regard, we recognize from the beginning of our lives that other people can be very useful in bringing us more happiness. Of course, this comes in more forms than mere survival, though. We can also entertain each other, challenge each other, give career advice, become romantic partners, teach skills, and of course much more. But in addition to recognizing the potential to aid our journey toward happiness, we also recognize that other people have the capacity to hinder that journey as well. By simply examining our own minds, we notice we make mistakes. We misperceive the world all the time. Just last week, I was running through my neighborhood listening to a song which I did not realize had bell chimes in it. When I heard the chimes, I spun around to see which house had such massive bells that I could hear them so clearly. Of course, I laughed once I realized my mistake. So we misperceive things, but we don't just misperceive the world around us. We are also capable of lying about the world around us. We can tell ourselves it is probably healthy to have a pizza because it has some olives on it, but we ourselves know there was a healthier option. It's as if we lie to ourselves to avoid a shorter route to health and happiness. And because we see we are capable of doing this to ourselves, we rightly infer that others are capable of doing it to us also. And of course, this is why we keep an eye out for when people act strangely or inconsistently. If someone claims to be very dedicated to their work, but continually sleeps through their alarm in the morning, we probably suspect they're not being entirely truthful. Or if they say they love their partner, but never have meaningful conversations, or stay out late without their partner's knowledge, this is obvious case to suspect they're being deceitful. It is this form of deceit that we call wrong, immoral, unethical, bad, or even evil. Anytime when a person knows there's a better route to happiness, but chooses another option, we call that a wrong act. If they did not know there was a better option, there would be no reason to morally fault them for what they did. For instance, if someone genuinely believed the shortest route to the top of a mountain was east, but in reality it was west, maybe because a new trail had just opened up to the west that they didn't know about, they're obviously not morally wrong for being mistaken when giving suboptimal directions. Likewise, if a person genuinely believes that their optimal route to happiness is to steal food for their family, they cannot be held morally at fault for this. They can only be held morally at fault if somehow the other people suspect that the person did know there was a better route to happiness and yet chose to do something else. That is what we mean when we say someone knew what they were doing was wrong. It literally was wrong in both the sense that it is incorrect and morally wrong. It is incorrect in that it is not the better route to happiness, and it is morally wrong in that it intentionally causes more suffering than necessary. And when this occurs, we nearly always use some type of recourse to correct the perceived wrongful behavior. Although guilt, shame, discouragement, punishment, or even more extreme, restraint, prison, or even war, are all words and concepts which sound nasty and often get derided as unnecessary, Literally all of us still participate in these acts to one degree or another, to prevent people from doing wrong acts. We may guilt someone for cheating on their partner. We may shame someone for openly lying while running for office. We discourage and even punish students who are disruptive in school. We restrain people in prisons in order to better monitor their activity. And when these things happen between countries, they take the form of tariffs, sanctions, or even wars. Although it should generally be a last resort, we all use negative reinforcement in order to get other people to compromise with us, whether they consent to it or not. If our confidence is high enough that they have wrongful intent, we literally strip them of all their rights as we see fit. A natural next question that many ask is, well, people obviously can't be allowed to only seek their own happiness, because what if one person's happiness contradicts another's? What if one person says their happiness is to end the life of another person without their consent? Well, in this case, 3 things are possible. Number 1. The person trying to kill the other person could be lying. They could know there is another, better route to happiness, but still say this is the best route in an attempt to justify it. Number 2, they could honestly believe this is the best route. And just like any other disagreement, the parties involved will need to try to find some kind of compromise or agreement between them. And lastly is option 3, the rather wild idea that people's happiness could actually be entirely different. Maybe what makes that person genuinely happy is to end the life of the other. While this hypothetically might be possible, this would be such a strange fluke of nature, and we find the former options to nearly always be more likely. Imagine if evolution or a god had been carefully shaping the motives of conscious creatures for all this time, only to make one of them operate by such radically different motives than normal happiness. Say natural selection had been shaping animals to desire group cohesion, physical health, relational fulfillment, and then suddenly one comes along that desires none of that and is motivated by chaos, suffering, disorder, etc. Or imagine if a god had created that being. Well, the first thing we would have to say is that that being is not at fault for acting according to what motivates it. Just like you are motivated by what makes you happy, you could not morally fault another being for doing something else that genuinely made it happy also. But, like anything else, you could still restrain or compromise with that being which disagrees with your happiness. But even so, it is probably more likely that that being is simply mistaken about the best route to happiness, or is even being deceitful. Thus, when people disagree on which are the best routes to happiness, we will still need to compromise, just like we do all the time anyways. Theories of morality usually follow 2 schools of thought. The first is called utilitarianism. This is the idea that whatever the majority of people prefer is the right action to be taken. Often called the greatest good for the greatest number, this generally is a reliable way of making group decisions. We often count votes to decide what to do in a group, or just try to survey what the overall preference is from a group for, say, where to go for lunch. As a generality, this theory is fine. Most of the time, it works to survey a group to understand their preferences, and this leads to no problems. Technically, though, this could theoretically lead to the abuse of minority groups, say if the minority really wanted to go somewhere else for lunch, or if the minority is getting certain rights removed by the majority. I don't think any of us would say that majorities are always right or inherently make right decisions. And that's where the second school of thought comes in. This is called deontology. And this claims that since we can't trust majorities to always be right, we need to come up with a few good rules which we know are right, and then build our society from there. Well, unfortunately, this leads to problems too, because you're right back to the majority or minority deciding what rules should be called the right ones. And even then, there are always exceptions. Like we said at the beginning of this video, you think the rule "don't kill" is simple enough, right? Well, there's self-defense. Don't steal? Well, there's stealing to save lives. There are always theoretical examples where the better choice would be to do something usually called wrong in order to achieve a better result. Thus, both of these schools of thought can be generally useful, but followed to their logical conclusions are technically wrong. The only truly consistent rule anyone can live by is to seek their own happiness. Now, this usually makes people nervous that if everyone sought their own happiness, everyone would constantly cheat, steal, lie, murder, and commit all sorts of heinous acts. But this is obviously not the case. As stated before, everyone assesses for themselves whether they think other people have the potential to help them on their journey to happiness. And most of the time, the answer is yes, that people have more potential to help than hinder. Any person who thought that eradicating all people would lead to their happiness and then did so would most likely find themselves even worse off than before. Thus, we probably need each other in order to maximize our own individual happiness. This is usually such a basic assumption in society that we don't even bother explaining it. The reason we value society is because it's good for us, the individual. And when society no longer becomes good for the individual, that individual is justified in either leaving or fighting back against the society. And if society does not exist for the happiness of its members, then what exactly does it exist for? Colonizing Mars? Constructing more buildings? No, the only reason that can make sense is if the purpose of working together benefits its members individually. Thus, we do have an objective measurement for morality. It is first and foremost that which truly makes you happy. It's not always easy to tell what that is, but it certainly exists. Even if you cannot tell the shortest route to a mountaintop or the quickest route to maximizing your happiness, we can generally tell when we're getting closer, and that's all we have to go by. If it hasn't been made clear by now, we can clarify that this is also the best solution we have to the is-ought problem proposed by David Hume. This dilemma points out the fact that you can scientifically examine what does exist, but you can never scientifically examine what ought to exist. You can put a cancer cell under a microscope, but you can't place under a microscope whether or not that cell should exist. That will always depend on the opinion of the observer. This is-ought dilemma is often posed as a reason to give up trying to describe objective values, since ought and should are not scientifically measurable words. They are practically meaningless. This is not the case though, because the only thing needed for these words to have any meaning is for an if to come before them. For example, in math, we can say, if I want my equation to equal 0, I should subtract all the numbers. In a friend group, we may say, if we want to eat dinner early, we should go to Joe's Cajun Grill because they have a happy hour then. Just the same for moral questions. The if we need to ask is, if I want to become maximally happy, what is the best route to getting there? What should I do? This gives us an objective, measurable goal that we can use to resolve the is-ought problem. Notice how in every example, they actually begin with if you want something. In the math problem, it's if we want it to equal 0. With the friends, it's if you want to eat early. Actually, in every instance that we use the word should, we are implying an if that is based off of what we want. It is simply a description of what we believe is the best route to our own happiness. But aren't there some examples where choosing to go against one's happiness is the right choice also? One of the most common examples of this is that of a soldier who is walking through a room with his squad, when suddenly an enemy throws a grenade through the window which lands between all of them. If the soldier jumps on the grenade to save his friends, he will lose his own life. Most of us would say this is the right choice. But jumping on the grenade and absorbing its impact certainly wouldn't make him happy. So this is a clear counterexample to the idea that we should always seek happiness, right? Well, let's look at the soldier's options in this situation. He could shorten his life by jumping on the grenade and saving his friends. His other option, though, would be to run and risk the death of his friends while he lived on, knowing he could have prevented it. Which of these options would cause the man more happiness? After the grenade was thrown into the room, the soldier's options for the rest of his life became extremely limited. Either save your friends or live without them. Rather than live with the knowledge that he could have prevented their deaths while he lived, he chose the route which made him happier. He chose to end his life and die with the knowledge that his friends would continue living. Of the available options, he still chose the route with the maximal available happiness to him in that moment. As surprising as it may be, choosing one's own happiness is still always the right choice, even in this case. And this even applies to more trivial examples of moral dilemmas. Take the trolley problem, for instance, where you find yourself standing next to a rail track for a trolley which has lost its brakes and is careening down the track. You see 5 people tied along the track ahead of the trolley, but there's a lever which could divert the trolley to another track with only 1 person on it. Is it right to pull the lever and divert the trolley to the 1 person and end their life? Or let the trolley continue its course and kill the 5 people? While there may not be a clear answer as to which option will certainly cause the least suffering, we hold that so long as the person in this example means to minimize suffering, they cannot be faulted for whatever action they choose. This theory does not necessarily take a stance on which actions are better or worse, but claims that we cannot hold someone morally at fault so long as they intend to minimize suffering and maximize happiness. So where does that leave us? We began this video by asking, when is it right to kill, steal, lie, or break the law? When is it right to do wrong actions? how do we know what is right and what is wrong? Well, the best answer anyone can offer is this. You are justified in doing whatever you truly believe will lead to your happiness. If that means breaking the speed limit, then break it. If that means stealing, then steal. And any other action deemed wrong by society, if you believe it would actually benefit your happiness, then go ahead, do it. But remember this. The justification you have is the same that everyone else has also. If you say you can hit someone because it makes you happy, remember that others have the right to do the same to you, and seek out their own happiness, whatever that may mean for them. And imagine if you became known as the person who carelessly hits other people because it makes you happy. After they group up to restrain you and punish you, was that really the best route to your happiness? Or were you mistaken? Or were you maybe even lying to yourself? Thus, we need to carefully consider if causing others any amount of suffering actually will ultimately lead to our own happiness or not. Anytime we say yes to that question, we justify bringing suffering onto ourselves also by others if they deem it necessary. This moral theory doesn't claim to have any easy answers for how to achieve happiness, but it does remove bad moral rules, such as serving a dictator at all costs because they're the supreme ruler, or blindly following a random religion or political party because it sounds authoritative. At the end of the day, your route to happiness will probably be most visible only to you. Others can offer outside opinions, which can be extremely valuable, but we usually know more about our own preferences, our own past, and what we would like to accomplish in our future. This means it's up to you to consider the consequences of your actions, whether that is truly what you want, and whether you are ignoring other options which you know you should take because they are better routes to happiness. This makes the pursuit of happiness an infinite task. We can always refine our understanding of the outside world in order to interact with it better. We can always refine our own ways of thinking so we get in our own way less and less. We can make progress toward becoming happier, but only through careful consideration, honesty, and refusing to live our lives by bad rules and rather committing to adhere to better ones. So what is ethical or unethical? What is moral or immoral? It is that which either leads to or away from your own happiness. And it is the task of all of us to continually better understand how to achieve that. Ultimately, it is up to you to decide what you believe will make you truly happy, and follow that route wherever it leads. With this understanding of ethics and morality, we are nearly ready to close out our chapter on the mind and enter into our next subject. Having touched on most major subjects in the mind, we are excited to move into Chapter 2, Health. But speaking of the mind and health, one more entry is appropriate before we begin that chapter. Our last entry in Chapter 1 will cover the crossroads between mind and body. Our next video will be on the topic of mental health. What inside and outside forces contribute to our ability to truly be happy? For several reasons, this subject has gained loads of attention in recent times, and we are excited to research and share our findings with you all. From psychology to health, science to relationships, politics history, technology, and several other subjects. We have more episodes on the way. But Axiom is more than just a podcast. The Axiom community is a form of support for those participating. So to join in one of our weekly discussions on TikTok, follow the link in the description. As always, thank you for being a part of this community. We hope whatever support you can offer is returned to you, and that you find value in building your understanding of the world from the axiom out to every other subject in life. See you next time.